Uncover Poirot's Secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries. In the shadowed halls of Murstone Hall, a scream pierces the night and a man lies dead, a silver letter opener in his heart. Was it greed, betrayal, or a dark family secret that drove the killer to strike? Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of lies, cigarette cases, torn silk, and cryptic notes, where every guest hides a motive. Who screamed and why? What truth did Thomas Reed uncover that cost him his life? Step into a classic Agatha Christie mystery where nothing is as it seems and Poirot's little gray cells reveal a shocking truth that will leave you breathless. Chapter 1. The Shadow of Murstone Hall. In the soft autumn light of October 1935, Murstone Hall stood like a sentinel of forgotten grandeur, its ivy-clad towers piercing the mist that clung to the Devonshire hills. The estate, nestled in a secluded valley, was a relic of Edwardian opulence, its vast windows glinting with secrets and its sprawling grounds whispering of old betrayals. To the casual observer, it was a place of serene beauty, but to those who knew its history, Murstone Hall was a crucible of ambition, jealousy, and unspoken resentments. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, gazed out of the carriage window as the vehicle rattled along the winding drive. The invitation to Murstone Hall had arrived unexpectedly, penned in the elegant hand of Lady Beatrice Ashford, the widowed matriarch of the Ashford family. She had requested Poirot's presence for a weekend gathering, citing a delicate matter that required his unique discretion. Hastings, always eager for a change of pace from London's bustle, had agreed to accompany his friend, though he sensed an undercurrent of unease in the invitation's vague wording. "Is it not curious, mon ami?" Poirot remarked, adjusting his immaculate gloves, "that Lady Ashford should summon Hercule Poirot to a mere house party? No, there is something amiss. The little gray cells, they are already at work." Hastings chuckled, accustomed to Poirot's flair for the dramatic. "Perhaps she simply wishes to impress her guests with your reputation, old chap. You are rather a celebrity these days." Poirot's mustache twitched with disapproval. "Celebrity? Pah! I am a detective, Hastings, not a performer. If Lady Ashford calls for me, it is because she fears something or someone. We shall see." The carriage drew to a halt before the grand oak doors of Murstone Hall, where a butler, stiff as a marionette, greeted them with a bow. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings. Lady Ashford awaits you in the drawing room." The drawing room was a study in faded elegance, heavy velvet curtains, a crackling fire, and portraits of stern-faced Ashfords glaring down from gilded frames. Lady Beatrice, a tall woman in her late 50s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, rose to greet them. Her smile was gracious but strained, as though it masked a deeper anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how good of you to come," she said, her voice smooth but tinged with urgency. "I trust your journey was pleasant?" "Most pleasant, madame," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker. "But I sense your invitation was not merely for the pleasure of our company." Lady Beatrice's smile faltered. "You are perceptive as always. Let us say there is a family matter that troubles me. I shall explain in due course, but first, allow me to introduce you to my guests." The assembled company was a curious mix, each member radiating their own brand of tension. There was Sir Reginald Ashford, Lady Beatrice's brother-in-law, a ruddy-faced man in his 60s whose booming laugh seemed forced. His young wife, Clara, a former actress with striking red hair, toyed nervously with her pearl necklace. Their son, Henry Ashford, a lanky man in his late 20s, lounged by the fireplace, his eyes darting restlessly. Beside him stood Dr. Evelyn Ward, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, the family physician, whose calm demeanor belied a watchful intensity. Then there was Miss Lydia Crane, Lady Beatrice's niece, a pale, delicate girl of 22 with an air of quiet defiance, and her fiancé, Mr. Victor Langston, a handsome but aloof barrister whose polished manners seemed calculated. Finally, there was Mr. Thomas Reed, a solicitor and old family friend whose nervous cough punctuated every silence. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room where crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over a table laden with silver and fine china. The conversation was polite but strained, punctuated by awkward pauses and forced laughter. Hastings, seated beside Clara Ashford, noted her distracted air. She barely touched her soup, her eyes flitting toward her husband and then away. Poirot, ever observant, engaged each guest with disarming courtesy, his questions seemingly innocuous but designed to probe. To Sir Reginald he inquired about the estate's history. To Clara he complimented her necklace, noting its unusual clasp. To Henry he asked about his recent travels abroad. Each response was met with Poirot's serene nod, but Hastings knew his friend was cataloguing every word, every glance, every hesitation. As the meal progressed, Lady Beatrice grew visibly agitated, her fingers twisting the stem of her wineglass. "Monsieur Poirot," she said at last, her voice low, "I must speak with you privately after dinner. There is something you must know." Before Poirot could reply, a piercing scream shattered the air. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock. The sound had come from the direction of the library, a room just beyond the dining hall. Sir Reginald leapt to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "What the devil was that?" Without waiting for an answer, he strode toward the library, the others trailing behind. Poirot, unhurried, followed at the rear, his eyes gleaming with sudden alertness. Hastings, his heart pounding, kept close to his friend. The library door stood ajar, revealing a scene of chaos. Books lay scattered on the floor, a heavy candelabrum overturned. In the center of the room, slumped across a mahogany desk, was the body of Thomas Reed, the solicitor. A letter opener, its handle ornate with silver filigree, protruded from his chest, and a pool of blood stained the blotter beneath him. Clara Ashford gasped, clutching her husband's arm. Lydia Crane swayed, her face ashen, while Victor Langston stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Dr. Ward knelt beside the body, her fingers probing for a pulse. "He's dead," she announced, her voice steady but grim. Poirot stepped into the room, his small frame radiating authority. "Do not touch anything, mes amis," he said softly, his eyes sweeping the scene. "The truth, it lies in the details, and we must preserve them all." Hastings stared at the lifeless form of Thomas Reed, his mind racing. The evening, so carefully orchestrated, had descended into horror. And yet, as he glanced at Poirot, he saw not shock, but a flicker of anticipation in his friend's eyes. The game, it seemed, had begun. Chapter 2. The Stain of Blood. The library of Murstone Hall was a cavern of shadows, its high shelves looming like silent witnesses to the grim tableau at its center. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the faint, acrid scent of extinguished candles. Thomas Reed's body lay slumped across the desk, the silver-handled letter opener buried deep in his chest, its ornate design glinting cruelly in the firelight. The guests stood frozen, their faces a mosaic of horror, suspicion, and dread, while Hercule Poirot, with his measured steps, surveyed the scene as if it were a puzzle laid out for his private amusement. Captain Hastings, his stomach churning, struggled to maintain his composure. He had seen death before on battlefields and in Poirot's cases, but the suddenness of this violence, in the heart of such genteel surroundings, unnerved him. "Good heavens, Poirot," he whispered, "who could have done this?" "We were all at dinner." Poirot raised a hand, his eyes never leaving the body. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it does not shout, it whispers. We must listen carefully." He approached the desk, his movements precise, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene without touching. Observe, Hastings. The letter opener, it is not a casual weapon. It is deliberate, chosen with intent. And the desk, see how the papers are scattered, yet not random. There is method here, Lady Beatrice, her face pale as the lace at her throat clutched the arm of a chair. "This is monstrous," she murmured. "Thomas was... he was a dear friend. Who could wish him harm?" Sir Reginald, his ruddy complexion drained, barked, "We must fetch the police at once. This is no time for theorizing." His voice, usually so commanding, trembled with an edge of panic. Poirot turned to him, his expression serene but firm. "The police, they must be summoned. But first we must ensure nothing is disturbed. The scene, it tells a story, and we must not let it be rewritten." He glanced at the butler, who hovered anxiously by the door. "You, monsieur, what is your name?" "Graves, sir," the butler replied, his voice steady despite his ashen face. "I've been with the family for 20 years. Bon, Monsieur Graves, please telephone the local constabulary and ensure no one leaves the house until they arrive. Comprenez-vous?" Graves nodded and hurried away. Poirot's gaze swept over the gathered company. Clara Ashford clung to her husband, her eyes wide with fear. Henry Ashford stood apart, his hands thrust into his pockets, his expression unreadable. Lydia Crane, supported by Victor Langston, was trembling, her delicate features drawn tight. Dr. Evelyn Ward, having risen from her brief examination of the body, watched Poirot with a guarded intensity, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding. "I must ask you to return to the dining room. Remain there until the police arrive. Captain Hastings and I will secure this room." There was a murmur of protest, but Poirot's authority was undeniable. Slowly the group filed out, their footsteps heavy on the polished floor. Hastings lingered, watching as Poirot knelt beside the desk, his eyes narrowing at the scattered papers. "What do you see, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his curiosity overcoming his unease. Poirot pointed to a small, overturned ink bottle, its contents pooling on the blotter near Reed's hand. "This ink, it is fresh, Hastings. The stain is not yet dry. And see here." He gestured to a single sheet of paper, half hidden beneath Reed's arm. It bore a few scrawled words, barely legible. "Trust no one. The will." The sentence was unfinished, cut off by a jagged smear of ink. "A message," Hastings ventured. "Was he writing it when he was attacked?" "Perhaps," Poirot mused. "Or perhaps it was placed here to mislead." "We must consider all possibilities," he stood, his gaze shifting to the letter opener. "This weapon, it is part of the desk set, non? It belongs here in this room. The murderer did not bring it, they found it. That tells us something, does it not?" Before Hastings could reply, the sound of heavy boots announced the arrival of the local police. Inspector Grayson, a burly man with a weathered face and a no-nonsense demeanor, strode into the library, followed by a young constable. His eyes widened at the sight of Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, I'd heard you were in the area, but I didn't expect to find you at a murder scene," Grayson said, his tone a mix of respect and wariness. "What's happened here?" Poirot inclined his head. "A tragedy, Inspector. Monsieur Thomas Reed, solicitor, has been murdered, stabbed with a letter opener, it seems, not more than an hour ago. We were all at dinner when the scream was heard." Grayson frowned, crouching beside the body. "Nasty business. Any idea who screamed?" "That, Inspector, is one of many questions," Poirot replied. "I suggest you begin by securing the house and interviewing the guests." "I shall assist if you permit." Grayson hesitated, then nodded. "Your reputation precedes you, Monsieur Poirot. I'd be a fool to turn down your help. But this is my investigation, understand?" Naturellement, Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. I am but a humble observer. As Grayson barked orders to his constable, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Listen carefully, mon ami. The scream, it came from this room, yet no one admits to it. And the time of death, it coincides with our dinner when all were present. Or so it seems. We must establish the alibis, the movements, the motives, the little gray cells. They are already stirring. Hastings nodded, though his mind reeled. But Poirot, if we were all at dinner, how could anyone have done this? The timing, Poirot interrupted, is everything. And it is never what it seems. Come, let us join the others. The game, it has only just begun. As they left the library, Hastings glanced back at the body of Thomas Reed, the unfinished note, and the gleaming letter opener. The air seemed heavier now, charged with suspicion. Murstone Hall, with its polished surfaces and polite facades, was a house of secrets, and one of them had turned deadly. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Order. The dining room of Murstone Hall, so recently a stage for polite conversation and clinking crystal, now felt like a gilded cage. The guests sat in uneasy silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of the chandelier. The air was thick with the weight of what had just occurred in the library, and each person seemed to shrink into themselves as though afraid to meet another's gaze. Captain Hastings, standing near the doorway, felt the tension like a physical force, his eyes darting from one guest to another, searching for a telltale sign of guilt. Hercule Poirot, however, was the picture of calm. He stood by the fireplace, his small, neat figure almost incongruous against the grandeur of the room. His hands were clasped behind his back, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, and his green eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. To Hastings, it was as if Poirot were a conductor preparing to lead an orchestra through a complex symphony, one composed of lies, secrets, and hidden truths. Inspector Grayson entered, his heavy footsteps breaking the silence. "Right," he said brusquely, addressing the room. "I've secured the library and my men are searching the grounds. Nobody leaves this house until I say so. Monsieur Poirot, you've seen the scene. Any thoughts?" Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of polite deference. "A few, Inspector, but they are as yet unformed. The murder of Monsieur Reed is a puzzle, and the pieces are scattered. We must gather them with care. May I suggest we begin with the alibis? It is, after all, a question of time." Grayson nodded, pulling a notebook from his pocket. "Fair enough. Let's have it, then. Where was everyone when the scream was heard at?" He glanced at his watch. "Let's say 8:30 this evening?" Lady Beatrice, seated at the head of the table, spoke first, her voice steady but strained. "We were all here, Inspector, in this very room. Dinner began at 7, and we had just finished the main course when the scream came from the library." "All of you?" Grayson pressed, his eyes narrowing. "Yes," Sir Reginald interjected, his tone gruff. "Every blessed one of us. The servants were in and out, of course, but the guests were here, eating and talking." Nobody left the table. Poirot's eyes flicked to Sir Reginald, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Nobody, you say, Sir Reginald? You are certain? The mind, it can be distracted, no? A moment away, a brief absence, it might go unnoticed." Sir Reginald flushed, his hands clenching. "I know what I saw, Poirot. We were all here. Ask anyone." Poirot turned to the butler, Graves, who stood silently by the door. "Monsieur Graves, you were serving, were you not? Did you observe any guest leave the dining room between, say, 8 and 8:30? Graves hesitated, his eyes flickering with unease. I cannot say for certain, sir. I was attending to the wine and the plates. The footmen were in the kitchen at times, fetching dishes. It's possible someone stepped out briefly, but I didn't notice." "Possible," Poirot repeated softly, as if savoring the word. Merci, Monsieur Graves. And the scream, did you hear it? Can you say from where it came? It was from the library, sir, Graves said firmly. I was just outside the dining room in the hall when I heard it. A woman's scream, I'd wager, sharp and frightened. A woman's scream, Poirot echoed, his gaze sweeping over the female guests. Clara Ashford's hand flew to her throat, and Lydia Crane's eyes widened, but neither spoke. Dr. Evelyn Ward remained impassive, her fingers resting lightly on the table. Grayson scribbled in his notebook. Right. So nobody left the dining room, but nobody's certain. Convenient. Let's try this another way. Who saw Mr. Reed last before dinner? Lydia Crane spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. I did, Inspector. Uncle Thomas, Mr. Reed, I mean, was in the library this afternoon around 4 o'clock. I went to fetch a book and he was there working on some papers. He seemed preoccupied. Preoccupied, Poirot interjected, his tone gentle but probing. How so, Mademoiselle Crane? Lydia hesitated, glancing at her fiancé, Victor Langston, who gave her a subtle nod. He was muttering to himself something about the will and changes. I didn't think much of it at the time. He was always fussing over legal matters. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The will, you say? Most interesting. And did he mention whose will, mademoiselle? No, Lydia said quickly, too quickly. He didn't say. I left him there and didn't see him again until dinner. Grayson grunted, making another note. Anyone else see him after that? Henry Ashford, who had been silent until now, shifted in his seat. I did, he said, his voice low. I passed by the library around 6. Father asked me to check on him, make sure he was coming to dinner. He was still at the desk writing. Looked irritated, if you ask me. Irritated, Poirot repeated, his head tilting slightly. And did he speak to you, Monsieur Henri? Not much, Henry admitted. Just said he'd be along soon. I didn't stay, Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Hastings, watching his friend, knew that every word was being catalogued, every inflection weighed. The little Belgian was already building a picture, though what it depicted Hastings could not yet guess. Grayson turned to Poirot. Anything else you'd like to ask, Monsieur Poirot? I've got a long night ahead, and I'd rather not waste time. Mais oui, Inspector, Poirot said smoothly. One small question for now. Madame Ashford, he addressed Clara, who started at the sound of her name. Your necklace, it is most striking. The clasp, it is unusual, non? A silver rose, I believe. Did you wear it all evening? Clara's hand flew to the necklace, her fingers trembling slightly. Why, yes, Monsieur Poirot. It's a family heirloom. I didn't take it off bon, Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. That is all for now. Inspector, I suggest you examine the library further. The papers on the desk, the ink bottle, the position of the candelabrum, these things, they speak. Grayson raised an eyebrow but nodded. Right. I'll have my men look into it. Everyone stay here until I say otherwise. As the inspector left, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. Mon ami, did you notice? The necklace of Madame Clara, it is not merely an heirloom. The clasp, it matches the design of the letter opener. A coincidence, perhaps, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences, Hastings frowned. You think Clara's involved? But she was at dinner, Poirot. We all were. Were we? Poirot murmured, his eyes glinting. The alibis, they are too perfect, too uniform. And the scream, why does no one claim it? No, Hastings, something is not right. The little gray cells, they are restless. As the guests sat in uneasy silence, Hastings felt a chill settle over him. Murstone Hall was no longer a place of elegance and comfort. It was a labyrinth of deception, and Poirot was only just beginning to navigate its twists. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The drawing room of Murstone Hall had transformed into an impromptu interrogation chamber, its plush armchairs and flickering firelight now casting long shadows that seemed to dance with accusation. Inspector Grayson, notebook in hand, paced before the assembled guests, his burly frame a stark contrast to the room's refined elegance. Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed chair near the window, his posture impeccable, his eyes alert as he observed the proceedings. Captain Hastings, positioned discreetly beside his friend, marveled at Poirot's composure. While the others fidgeted with nerves, Poirot appeared as serene as if he were enjoying a quiet tisane. "We'll take statements one by one," Grayson announced, his voice echoing slightly in the tense silence. "Starting with you, Lady Ashford. The rest of you, wait in the adjoining salon. No talking amongst yourselves, mind." Lady Beatrice rose with dignified poise, though her hands betrayed a slight tremor as she smoothed her skirt. She followed Grayson to a small antechamber, Poirot and Hastings trailing behind at the inspector's nod. The room was cozy, lined with bookshelves and lit by a single lamp, creating an intimate yet oppressive atmosphere. Once seated, Grayson began. "Lady Ashford, you invited Mr. Reed here. What was the purpose of his visit?" Lady Beatrice's blue eyes met his steadily. "Thomas, Mr. Reed was our family solicitor for many years. He came at my request to discuss the estate's affairs. Murstone Hall has been in the Ashford family for generations, but with my late husband's debts—" She trailed off, her voice catching. "There were matters of inheritance to settle." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his voice soft and probing. "Inheritance, madame? And the will? Did Monsieur Reed mention any changes to a will?" Her gaze flickered to Poirot, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Why, yes. My husband's will, to be precise. There have been disputes. Sir Reginald believes he is entitled to more of the estate, but Thomas was reviewing the documents to confirm the original terms." Grayson jotted notes furiously. "Disputes, eh? Anyone else involved in these disputes?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. "Well, Henry as the heir apparent, and Lydia my niece, who stands to inherit a portion. But it's all rather complicated." "Complicated enough for murder?" Grayson pressed bluntly. She recoiled. "Inspector, surely you don't suggest—" Poirot interjected smoothly. "Madam, if you please, where were you precisely at 8:30 when the scream was heard?" "I was at the dining table, Monsieur Poirot, as were we all. I had just poured myself a glass of water." "And Monsieur Reed," Poirot continued, "did he seem agitated during dinner? Did he speak of any fears?" "No," she replied, though her eyes darted away. "He was quiet, perhaps, but nothing unusual." They dismissed her, and next came Sir Reginald, his face flushed with indignation. He sat heavily, crossing his arms. "This is preposterous. Thomas was a good man. But if you're looking for motives, ask about his gambling debts. He owed money to half the county." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Debts? First I've heard of it. And you, Sir Reginald? Where were you at the time of the scream?" "At the table, man. Carving the roast, if you must know. My knife was in the beef, not in Thomas." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Your knife, monsieur? But the weapon was a letter opener from the library desk. You are familiar with the library, no?" "Of course," Sir Reginald blustered. "I use it often, but I didn't kill him." "And the will," Poirot said casually. "You disagreed with Monsieur Reed about its terms?" Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. "Beatrice is trying to cut me out with Reed's help. The estate should be mine by rights. My brother's intention was clear, but that's no reason for murder." As he left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "Observe, mon ami, how he mentions debts. A deflection, perhaps? Clara Ashford entered next, her red hair catching the lamplight like flames. She was visibly nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I barely knew Mr. Reed," she said preemptively. "We only met a few times." Grayson nodded. "And your whereabouts at 8:30? "At dinner, Inspector." I stepped out briefly just before the scream. To powder my nose, you understand. Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot, who leaned forward. "How briefly, madame?" "And did you pass by the library?" Clara's cheeks paled. "No." I went upstairs to my room. It was only a minute or two. "And your necklace," Poirot said, his tone conversational. "It is beautiful. The clasp, it is a silver rose matching the design on the letter opener. A family piece, you said." "Yes," she whispered. "It was a gift from Reginald." "But what has that to do with anything?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps nothing, madam." "Perhaps everything." Henry Ashford followed, his lanky frame slouching into the chair. "I didn't do it," he said flatly. "Reed was helping me with some investments." "Why would I kill him?" "Investments?" Grayson queried. "What sort?" "Overseas ventures," Henry replied evasively. "Nothing important." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And at dinner, monsieur?" "You were present throughout?" "Yes, except—" "I did leave for a moment to fetch a cigar from the hall, but I didn't go near the library." "A cigar?" Poirot echoed. "And did you hear anything unusual?" Henry shook his head, but his fingers drummed restlessly on the armrest. Dr. Evelyn Ward was composed, her sharp features betraying no emotion. "As the family physician, I examined the body immediately. Death was instantaneous from the stab wound." Grayson nodded. "Any medical insights?" "The wound suggests a strong thrust, but not necessarily from a man. Anger, perhaps, or desperation." "And your alibi?" Poirot asked. "At the table. I didn't leave." "But you are skilled with instruments, doctor," Poirot noted. "A scalpel, a letter opener, similar non." She met his gaze coolly. "I heal, Monsieur Poirot, not harm." Lydia Crane entered trembling, Victor Langston insisting on accompanying her. Grayson allowed it reluctantly. "I loved Uncle Thomas," Lydia said, tears welling. "He was like a father to me." "And the will?" Poirot probed gently. "You mentioned he was muttering about it." Lydia nodded. "He said there were changes needed to protect me. Aunt Beatrice, she doesn't approve of Victor." Victor squeezed her hand. "It's true. But that's no motive for murder." "And you, Monsieur Langston?" Poirot turned to him. "Your alibi?" "With Lydia at dinner." Neither of us left. As they departed, Poirot turned to Grayson. "Each has a motive, Inspector, debts, inheritance, secrets. But the alibis, they overlap yet fray at the edges." Grayson sighed. "It's a tangle, all right." "What about that scream?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, the scream, it is the key, I think. A woman's scream per graves, yet none admit it." Hastings pondered. "Perhaps it was faked or from outside." "Non, mon ami," Poirot said. "It was real and close. We must dig deeper." As the interviews concluded, the guests reconvened, suspicion hanging like fog. Poirot stood addressing them. "Mes amis, the truth hides in the details. A necklace, a cigar, a brief absence. Hercule Poirot will uncover it." The night deepened, Murstone Hall's secrets stirring as the detective's little gray cells whirred into action. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The morning after Thomas Reed's murder cast Murstone Hall in a somber pallor, the mist outside the tall windows mirroring the fog of suspicion within. The guests, confined to the house by Inspector Grayson's orders, moved like specters through the grand rooms, their voices hushed, their glances sharp with mistrust. Breakfast was a tense affair, the clink of porcelain and the scrape of silverware punctuating an uneasy silence. Hercule Poirot, seated at the end of the table with a cup of perfectly brewed coffee, observed the scene with the keen eye of a painter studying a canvas, noting every brushstroke of unease. Captain Hastings, picking at his toast, leaned toward Poirot. "It's dashed uncomfortable, old boy," he whispered. "Everyone's looking at everyone else as if they're the culprit. But surely it's obvious. Sir Reginald's the one with the temper and the motive over that will business." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "Mon ami, you leap to conclusions with the enthusiasm of a hare. Sir Reginald, he is loud, oui, but noise does not always signify guilt. The obvious suspect is often the least likely." "We must look beyond the surface." Inspector Grayson entered the dining room, his face set in a grim line. "Good morning, all," he said brusquely. "I've had a report from my men. We found something in the library, a cigarette case monogrammed with the initials R.A. It was under the desk near the body. Care to explain, Sir Reginald?" The room froze. Sir Reginald's ruddy face turned a shade paler, his fork clattering to his plate. "My cigarette case. That's preposterous. I wasn't in the library last night." Clara Ashford, sitting beside him, gripped his arm. "Reginald, you did misplace it yesterday, remember? You said you couldn't find it after tea." Sir Reginald's eyes widened. "Yes, but I thought I'd left it in the billiard room. Someone must have taken it." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "Convenient. And you're sure you didn't step into the library during dinner?" "I told you I was carving the roast," Sir Reginald snapped, his voice rising. "Ask anyone." Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing yet commanding. "Calm yourself, Sir Reginald." "Inspector, may I see this cigarette case?" Grayson hesitated, then handed over a small silver case, its surface engraved with the initials R.A. Poirot turned it over in his gloved hands, his eyes narrowing. "It is polished, Inspector, almost too clean. No fingerprints, perhaps." Grayson frowned. "Wiped clean, you mean?" "My men are checking, but yes, it's spotless." "Interesting," Poirot murmured, returning the case. "A clue or a distraction?" We shall see. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings felt a prickle of doubt. Sir Reginald's bluster was convincing, but the cigarette case was damning. Could he have been so careless, or was someone framing him? Grayson turned his attention to the group. "There's more. One of my men found a torn piece of fabric caught on a rosebush outside the library window. Blue silk, looks like. Anyone care to claim it?" Lydia Crane gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. All eyes turned to her, and Hastings noticed her dress, a pale blue silk gown, its hem slightly frayed. I don't know how that could have happened," she stammered. "I wasn't near the library window." Victor Langston, ever protective, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Inspector, this is absurd." "Lydia was with me all evening. That fabric could belong to anyone." "Could it?" Grayson said skeptically. "We'll need to examine your dress, Miss Crane." Lydia's face crumpled, and she nodded mutely. Poirot, watching closely, tilted his head. "Mademoiselle, you are certain you did not approach the library? Perhaps a walk in the garden earlier?" "No," Lydia insisted, her voice trembling. "I stayed indoors all day." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, then shifted to Victor. "And you, Monsieur Langston? You are her alibi, oui? But alibis, they can be fragile things." Victor's jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate your insinuations, Poirot." "Lydia and I were together." As Grayson moved to question Henry Ashford, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, what do you make of these discoveries? A cigarette case, a scrap of silk, both so conveniently placed." Hastings frowned. They point to Sir Reginald and Lydia, don't they? But you think they're too obvious? Précisément, Poirot said, his voice low. The murderer, he is clever. These clues, they are like the red herrings in your English idiom, designed to mislead. The cigarette case, wiped clean, suggests intent. The silk, torn so perfectly, it is theatrical, none. You think someone planted them? Hastings asked, his mind racing. Poirot nodded. It is possible. We must consider who benefits from casting suspicion on Sir Reginald and Mademoiselle Crane. And why the questioning continued, with Grayson pressing each guest. Henry Ashford admitted to owning a blue silk tie, but it was intact, he claimed, and in his room. Dr. Evelyn Ward, composed as ever, denied owning anything blue, her wardrobe favoring practical grays and blacks. Clara Ashford, however, grew flustered when asked about her movements, repeating her claim of a brief trip upstairs during dinner. As the morning wore on, Grayson's frustration grew. Everyone's got an alibi, but these clues don't add up. Poirot, you've been quiet. What's your take? Poirot stood, his small frame radiating authority. Inspector, the clues, they are like pieces of a mosaic. Alone they mean little. Together they will form a picture. But we must ask, why was Monsieur Reed killed? His papers, his role as solicitor, there is a motive there, I think. And the scream, still, no one claims it. Why? Grayson rubbed his chin. You think the scream's important? Vital, Poirot replied. It is the moment the crime was announced, yet it hides its own mystery. I suggest, Inspector, you examine the library window more closely. Was it open, locked? And the rose bush, how fresh is the tear in the silk? Grayson nodded, jotting notes. Good points. I'll have my men look again. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes scanning the dining room. Hastings, he said softly. There is a pattern here, but it is obscured. The cigarette case, the silk, the alibis, they are too perfect, too convenient. Someone is playing a game with us, and Hercule Poirot does not lose at games. Hastings shivered, glancing at the somber faces around them. Sir Reginald's cigarette case, Lydia's torn silk. These clues seemed to point fingers, yet Poirot's words rang true. They were too neat, too deliberate. The real murderer, it seemed, was hiding behind a carefully constructed veil of misdirection, and only Poirot's relentless logic could tear it away. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The late morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Murstone Hall, casting a muted glow over the library where Thomas Reed's body had been discovered. The room, now cordoned off by Inspector Grayson's men, seemed to hold its breath, its shelves of leather-bound books and overturned candelabrum frozen in the moment of violence. Hercule Poirot stood near the desk, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on a small, seemingly insignificant detail. A single drop of ink, dried on the edge of the blotter just beyond the pool of blood. Captain Hastings, standing by the window, watched his friend with a mix of curiosity and impatience. What is it, Poirot? You've been staring at that desk for ages. Surely the cigarette case and the silk are more important. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. Mon ami, you are like the hound who chases the fox but misses the scent. The cigarette case, the silk, these are the fireworks meant to dazzle and distract, but this drop of ink... He pointed delicately with a gloved finger. This is a whisper of truth. Hastings frowned, peering at the tiny black spot. Ink? But there's ink everywhere. The bottle was spilled. Précisément, Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. The bottle was spilled, yet this drop, it is separate, precise. It did not flow with the rest. And see here. He gestured to the unfinished note beneath Reed's arm, the scrawled words, trust no one. The will, smudged but legible. The ink of the note, it is not the same. The note is written in blue ink, while the spilled bottle and this drop are black. Hastings' eyes widened. 2 inks? You mean the note wasn't written at the desk? Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. It is possible, Hastings. The note, it may have been written elsewhere, placed here to suggest a struggle or a warning. Or perhaps Monsieur Reed was interrupted before he could use the black ink. We must discover which Inspector Grayson, who had been conferring with a constable near the door, approached. Found something, Poirot? My men have checked the window. It was unlocked, slightly ajar. The rose bush outside shows fresh scratches, and that silk matches Miss Crane's dress, though she swears she wasn't there. Poirot's expression remained serene. The window, it is interesting, Inspector. An unlocked window suggests a possibility, an outsider perhaps, or an escape. But the silk, it is too convenient, no. And this drop of ink, have your men examined the pens on the desk? Grayson blinked. Pens? Well, there's the one in the inkstand, dipped in black ink. Matches the spilled bottle bon, Poirot said, moving to the desk. He lifted the pen, a fine fountain pen with a gold nib, and examined it closely. This pen, it has been used recently, but the nib, it is clean, too clean. Someone has wiped it, perhaps to remove traces of use. Grayson rubbed his chin. You're saying the killer tampered with the pen? Why? To obscure the truth, Poirot replied simply. The ink, the pen, the note, they tell a story, but it is not the one we are meant to believe. I suggest, Inspector, you search the house for another pen, one with blue ink. It may lead us to the note's true origin. As Grayson issued orders to his constable, Poirot turned his attention to the candelabrum, which lay on its side near the desk. And this, Hastings, observe. The candelabrum is heavy, bronze, yet it is overturned with precision, as if placed, not knocked. The candles, they are intact, not broken. A struggle, it would be more chaotic, none? Hastings nodded slowly, beginning to see the pattern Poirot was weaving. You think the scene was staged? Staged, arranged, call it what you will, Poirot said. The murderer, they are an artist of deception, but even the finest artist leaves a brushstroke out of place. Grayson returned, holding a small evidence bag. My men found something else outside, near the rose bush. A cufflink, silver with a rose motif. Matches that necklace of Mrs. Ashford's. Care to explain that, Poirot? Poirot's eyes narrowed. A rose motif, you say? Most intriguing. It suggests a connection to Madame Clara, or perhaps to the letter opener itself. But again, it is too perfect, too deliberate. We must question her further. The inspector sent for Clara Ashford, who entered the library with visible reluctance, her red hair pinned tightly as if to restrain her nerves. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice unsteady. I don't know what you're implying, but I've done nothing wrong. Grayson held up the cufflink. This was found outside the library window. It matches your necklace, Mrs. Ashford. Care to explain? Clara's hand flew to her throat, touching the silver rose clasp. A cufflink? But I don't know. Reginald has cufflinks, but not like that. I swear I wasn't near the window. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unrelenting. Madame, you left the dining room briefly during dinner, did you not? You said it was to powder your nose, but perhaps you stepped outside for air? The rose bushes near the terrace easily reached Clara's eyes filled with tears. No, I went upstairs. I told you I needed a moment alone. This is all too much. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, madame. That is all for now. As Clara left, Grayson sighed. She's hiding something, but I can't pin it down. What's your take, Poirot? The cufflink, like the silk and the cigarette case, is a distraction, Poirot said. But the ink, this drop of black ink, separate from the blue of the note, it is a clue that cannot lie. We must find the source of the blue ink, and we must learn who had access to this room before dinner. Hastings, inspired by Poirot's focus, ventured a thought. What about the scream, Poirot? Could it be connected to the ink somehow? Maybe the person who screamed saw something, someone writing the note? Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. Bien pensé, Hastings. The scream, it is the pivot of this mystery. A woman's scream per Monsieur Graves, yet none admit to it. We must press further, but delicately. The truth, it is close. But it hides behind these carefully placed shadows. As Grayson's men continued their search, Poirot stepped back, his mind clearly racing. The drop of ink, the clean pen, the staged candelabrum, these were the threads of a tapestry only he could see. Murstone Hall's secrets were beginning to unravel, but the murderer's design was still maddeningly obscure, and Hastings knew Poirot would not rest until every detail was in its proper place. Chapter 7. More Lies. Surface. The afternoon sun hung low over Murstone Hall, its golden rays doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over the house. The guests, confined to the drawing room under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye, sat in strained silence, their nerves frayed by the mounting weight of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, however, seemed untouched by the oppressive atmosphere. He stood by a tall window, his small frame silhouetted against the light, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the manicured gardens. To Captain Hastings, who fidgeted nearby, Poirot's calm was both reassuring and maddening, a sign that the detective's little gray cells were piecing together a puzzle still invisible to others. Inspector Grayson entered, his face etched with frustration. "We've searched the house for that blue ink pen, Poirot," he said, wiping his brow. "Nothing yet, but we did find something in Mr. Reed's room, a letter half burned in the fireplace. Looks like it was written to him, warning him about dangerous changes to a will. No signature, though." Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming with interest. "A letter, you say? Most intriguing. May I see it, Inspector?" Grayson handed over a charred fragment carefully preserved in an evidence bag. The paper was scorched, but a few lines remained legible in a neat, slanting hand. "Beware of altering the will. Dangerous consequences, and trust no one in this house." The ink was unmistakably blue. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, examining the fragment. "The blue ink, it matches the note found on Monsieur Reed's body." "This is no coincidence, Inspector. The letter and the note, they are linked, but by whom?" Hastings leaned closer, his curiosity piqued. Could Reed have written the note himself as a warning after receiving this? Poirot shook his head. "Non, Hastings. The note on the desk was staged, I am certain. But this letter, it is a genuine warning sent before the murder. We must discover who wrote it and why they burned it." Grayson called for the guests to reassemble, his voice sharp. "Right. Let's have another round of questions. This letter changes things. Who here knew about Reed's work on the will?" The room stirred, glances darting like arrows. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "We all knew Thomas was meddling with the will. Beatrice told us he was reviewing it, stirring up trouble. But I didn't write any letter." Lady Beatrice, seated rigidly, spoke up. "Inspector, I discussed the will with Thomas privately, but I never warned him of danger. I wanted clarity, not conflict." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lydia Crane, whose pale face was taut with tension. "Mademoiselle Crane, you mentioned Monsieur Reed's preoccupation with the will. Did you know of any warnings he received?" Lydia's eyes widened and she clutched Victor Langston's hand. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I only heard him muttering about changes, as I told you. I didn't know about any letter." Victor's expression darkened. "This is harassment, Poirot. Lydia's done nothing but answer your questions. Why don't you focus on that cigarette case or the cufflink?" Poirot's smile was serene but unyielding. "Monsieur Langston, every detail matters. The cigarette case, the cufflink, the silk, they are distractions, perhaps. But this letter, it speaks of fear, of betrayal. And you, monsieur, as a barrister, you understand the importance of a will, no? Victor stiffened. I understand my profession, yes, but I had no reason to harm Reed. He was helping Lydia secure her inheritance. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, Mademoiselle Crane says Lady Beatrice disapproves of your engagement. Perhaps Monsieur Reed's changes threatened your plans? Lydia gasped, her voice trembling. That's not true. Uncle Thomas supported us. Before Victor could respond, Clara Ashford stood abruptly, her voice breaking the tension. Enough! I can't bear this any longer. Her hands twisted her pearl necklace, the silver rose clasp glinting. I saw something last night before dinner. I didn't want to say, but... The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Grayson leaned forward. Go on, Mrs. Ashford. What did you see? Clara's gaze darted to her husband, then away. I saw Thomas in the library arguing with someone. It was around 6, just before Henry checked on him. I couldn't hear much, but Thomas was angry, saying something about betrayal and ruining everything. I didn't see who it was. The door was ajar, and I only glanced in. Why didn't you mention this before? Grayson demanded. I was afraid, Clara cried. This house, everyone's hiding something. I didn't want to be involved. Poirot stepped forward, his voice gentle but probing. Madam, this argument, who do you suspect it was with? Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering to Sir Reginald, then to Henry. I don't know. It could have been anyone. The voice was low. Muffled, Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, madame. Your honesty, it is most illuminating. As Clara sat trembling, Grayson turned to Henry. You were in the library at 6, you said. Did you see this argument? Henry's face tightened. No. Reed was alone when I saw him. He was irritated, as I told you, but there was no one else there. Poirot tilted his head. And yet Madame Clara saw an argument at the same time. Curious, no? Perhaps, Monsieur Henri, you arrived just after the other person left? Henry shrugged, his nonchalance strained. Maybe. I didn't see anyone. Dr. Evelyn Ward, silent until now, spoke up, her voice cool. Inspector, if I may, arguments are common in tense households. As the family physician, I've seen the Ashfords' disputes over money and inheritance. Thomas was under pressure, but he never mentioned a specific threat. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, Docteur, you were quick to examine the body to pronounce death. You saw no signs of this pressure in Monsieur Reed's demeanor. Dr. Ward met his gaze steadily. He was tired, perhaps distracted. But nothing more, Grayson sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a mess. Letters, arguments, clues that don't add up. Poirot, what's your angle? Poirot clasped his hands, his voice calm but commanding. The letter, Inspector, it is the heart of this mystery. Someone feared Monsieur Reed's actions enough to warn him, and then to kill him. The blue ink, it connects the letter to the note on the desk. We must find the pen, and we must uncover who in this house feared exposure. As the guests dispersed, Hastings whispered to Poirot, Clara's revelation, do you believe her? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. She speaks a truth, Hastings, but not the whole truth. An argument, yes, but her hesitation, her glances, they betray a deeper secret. The lies, they are piling up, but the little gray cells, they see through the fog. The air in Murstone Hall grew heavier, the web of deceit tightening. Poirot's focus on the blue ink and the burned letter hinted at a motive rooted in betrayal. But the murderer's identity remained elusive, hidden behind a cascade of half-truths and carefully placed misdirection. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The atmosphere in Murstone Hall had grown stifling by the second evening, the weight of Thomas Reed's murder pressing down on its inhabitants like a storm cloud refusing to break. The drawing room, once a haven of elegance, now felt like a stage where every gesture and word was scrutinized. The guests sat in scattered clusters, their faces drawn, their conversations reduced to murmurs. Hercule Poirot, seated in a velvet armchair by the fire, sipped his tisane with an air of serene detachment. But his sharp eyes missed nothing. Captain Hastings, beside him, felt the tension coil tighter with each passing hour, sensing that the case was nearing a critical juncture. Inspector Grayson, his patience fraying, had spent the day pursuing leads. The blue ink pen remained elusive, and the burned letter's origin was still a mystery. He entered the room now, his boots heavy on the polished floor, and addressed the group with barely concealed frustration. "We've searched every room, every desk. No pen, no more letters, but I'm not done with you lot. Someone's hiding something, and I'll find out what." Lydia Crane, seated near the window with Victor Langston, suddenly stood, her delicate frame trembling. Her pale blue eyes were red-rimmed, and her voice cracked as she spoke. "I can't bear this any longer. All these questions, these accusations, it's too much." She clutched her shawl, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Uncle Thomas was good to me, and now you're all tearing us apart, looking for a killer among us." Victor rose, placing a protective arm around her. "Lydia, darling, calm yourself. You don't have to—" "No, Victor," she cried, pulling away. "I have to say it. I know something I didn't tell before." The room fell silent, every head turning toward her. Even Poirot leaned forward, his cup paused midway to his lips. Grayson stepped closer, his notebook at the ready. "Go on, Miss Crane. What do you know?" Lydia's voice trembled, but she pressed on. "Last night, before dinner, I overheard Uncle Thomas in the library. He wasn't just arguing, he was pleading. I didn't tell you because I was afraid it would make things worse. He was saying, you can't do this, it's betrayal." I couldn't hear the other voice clearly, but it was a man's, I'm sure of it. And then I heard something else, something about the old will must stand. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but piercing. "Mademoiselle, this is most significant. You are certain of the words? And the time? This was before Monsieur Henri's visit at 6. Lydia nodded, her hands twisting the shawl. "Yes, around 5:30 I was passing by the library door on my way to dress for dinner. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but Uncle Thomas sounded so desperate." Victor's face darkened. "Lydia, why didn't you tell me this? You shouldn't have kept it to yourself." "I was scared," she sobbed. "Everyone's so angry about the will, and I didn't want to point fingers. But now I can't keep silent. Someone in this house wanted Uncle Thomas dead." The room erupted in murmurs. Sir Reginald's face turned a deep shade of red, and he slammed his fist on the armrest. "This is outrageous. Are you accusing me, girl? I was nowhere near the library at 5:30. Clara Ashford, pale and trembling, clutched her necklace. "Lydia, how could you? Stirring up more trouble when we're all suffering." Lady Beatrice, her composure fraying, stood and raised a hand for silence. "Enough. Lydia, you should have spoken sooner, but I understand your fear. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, this must be investigated. Thomas was my friend, and I won't have his death tear this family apart further." Poirot rose, his small stature commanding the room's attention. "Mademoiselle Crane, your courage, it is admirable. This revelation, it shifts the puzzle. A man's voice, a plea about the will, this narrows our focus. But tell me, mademoiselle, did you hear anything else? A name, perhaps, or a sound?" Lydia shook her head, tears streaming. "No, just a rustle, like papers being moved. I left quickly, I didn't want to be seen." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, mademoiselle. You have done well to speak, Grayson, scribbling furiously, turned to the group. Right. Who was near the library at 5:30? Speak up or I'll drag it out of you. Henry Ashford shifted uncomfortably. I told you I was there at 6, not earlier. I was in the billiard room before that with Father Sir Reginald, nodded curtly. That's right. We were playing a round. Ask Graves. He brought us drinks. Victor Langston spoke up, his tone measured. I was with Lydia in the drawing room until just before 6 when she went to change. I stayed behind reading Dr. Evelyn Ward, her sharp features impassive, added, I was in my room preparing some notes. I didn't go near the library. Poirot's gaze lingered on each speaker, his mind clearly racing. And yet, someone was with Monsieur Reed at 5:30, arguing, pleading. The will, it is the heart of this matter, non? A will that threatens some and benefits others. Grayson turned to Poirot. You're thinking this argument led to the murder? But the timing. Reed was killed during dinner, not before. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. Or perhaps the argument planted the seed. The blue ink, the burned letter, the note on the desk, these are threads of a single tapestry. We must find the man who argued with Monsieur Reed, and we must ask why Mademoiselle Lydia waited to speak. Lydia flinched, but Victor stepped forward. She was frightened, Poirot. Stop badgering her. Poirot's smile was gentle but unyielding. I do not badger, Monsieur Langston. I seek the truth, and the truth, it is like a delicate flower. It must be handled with care, but it cannot remain hidden. As Lydia sank into her chair, sobbing softly, Hastings whispered to Poirot, Do you believe her, Poirot? About the argument? Poirot's eyes gleamed. She speaks a truth, Hastings, but it is partial. Her fear, it is genuine, but her delay, it suggests she protects someone or fears them. The man's voice, the will, this is no red herring. It is a cornerstone. The room grew quiet again, the guests retreating into their own thoughts. Lydia's revelation had cracked the facade of Murstone Hall, exposing raw nerves and hidden fears. Poirot, however, remained focused, his mind weaving connections between the argument, the blue ink, and the unseen foe who had struck Thomas Reed down. The truth was closer, but it was still shrouded in the shadows of deception. Chapter 9. The trap, the evening shadows deepened within Murstone Hall, casting long, jagged patterns across the drawing room's ornate wallpaper. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the house itself sensed that the unraveling of Thomas Reed's murder was drawing near. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of truth, had requested that all the guests gather after dinner, a request delivered with such calm authority that none dared refuse. Inspector Grayson, though skeptical of Poirot's methods, agreed to the assembly, sensing that the Belgian detective was poised to spring a trap. Captain Hastings, seated near the fireplace, felt his pulse quicken. He had seen Poirot in such moments before, when the little gray cells, like a finely tuned machine, were ready to expose the hidden gears of a crime. Yet, as the guests filed in, their faces a mix of dread and defiance, Hastings could not shake the feeling that the murderer was watching, waiting, and perhaps even anticipating Poirot's move. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame commanding attention as effortlessly as a general on a battlefield. His mustache was impeccable, his eyes sharp and gleaming under the chandelier's glow. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and measured, we are gathered to discuss the tragic death of Monsieur Thomas Reed. But more than that, we are here to uncover the truth. A truth that hides among you, cloaked in lies and misdirection. The guests shifted uneasily. Lady Beatrice sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly. Sir Reginald's face was flushed, his jaw set. Clara Ashford toyed nervously with her necklace, the silver rose clasp catching the light. Henry Ashford slouched in his chair, his eyes darting. Lydia Crane clung to Victor Langston's arm, her face pale, while Dr. Evelyn Ward maintained her cool composure, her gaze steady but guarded. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, arms crossed. "Get on with it, Poirot." "What's this about a trap?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience, Inspector. The murderer, they are clever, but they have made mistakes. Tonight we shall expose them by examining the threads of this crime, the blue ink, the burned letter, the argument, the scream. But first, let us test the alibis once more with a new perspective." He turned to Clara Ashford, his tone gentle but probing. "Madame Clara, you said you left the dining room briefly before the scream to powder your nose. Yet the cufflink with the rose motif found near the library window matches your necklace. Can you explain this?" Clara's eyes widened, her fingers tightening on the clasp. "I told you it's not mine. Reginald doesn't even own such cufflinks. Someone must have placed it there." Poirot nodded, unruffled. "Perhaps. But let us consider timing. The scream was heard at 8:30 during dinner. All claim to have been at the table, yet Madame Clara and Monsieur Henri both admit to brief absences. Monsieur Henri, you fetched a cigar, oui?" Henry nodded curtly. "Yes, from the hall. I wasn't gone long." "And yet," Poirot continued, "Mademoiselle Lydia overheard an argument in the library at 5:30 involving a man's voice. You were in the library at 6, Monsieur Henri. Did you see or hear anything unusual?" Henry's jaw tightened. "I told you Reed was alone, irritated but alive." No argument, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet Mademoiselle Lydia's account suggests someone was with Monsieur Reed earlier. Let us hypothesize, what if the argument was not about the will's terms but about something more personal? A betrayal, perhaps, of trust or loyalty." Lydia's breath hitched and Victor squeezed her hand. "Poirot, you're twisting her words," Victor snapped. "Lydia's told you everything." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but relentless. "Not everything, Monsieur Langston. The scream, a woman's scream per Monsieur Graves, has not been claimed. Why? Because the one who screamed fears to reveal themselves. They saw something, perhaps, or they were part of the crime." The room grew deathly still. Lady Beatrice spoke, her voice low. "Monsieur Poirot, are you suggesting one of us screamed to distract or mislead?" "Précisément, madame," Poirot said. "The scream was no accident. It was time to draw attention, to mark the moment of the murder, or to obscure it. Let us test this theory." "Monsieur Graves," the butler, standing discreetly by the door, stepped forward. "Yes, sir?" "You heard the scream at 8:30 from the library. You are certain it was a woman's voice?" Graves nodded. "Quite certain, sir." Sharp and frightened, like a cry of shock, Poirot turned to the women, Lady Beatrice, Clara, Lydia, and Dr. Ward. "Mesdames, I ask you now directly, did you scream?" A chorus of denials followed, each voice tinged with indignation or fear. Poirot's gaze lingered on Lydia, whose eyes were downcast. "Mademoiselle Crane, you are silent now, but your tears last night spoke volumes. Did you scream perhaps upon seeing something in the library?" Lydia's head snapped up, her face ashen. "No! I wasn't there, I swear it." Victor stood, his voice sharp. "Enough, Poirot. You're bullying her." Poirot's smile was serene. "I do not bully, monsieur. I observe, and I observe that Mademoiselle Lydia is frightened, not of me, but of what she knows. Let me propose a scenario. The murderer, knowing Monsieur Reed was a threat, entered the library during dinner. A brief absence, 2 minutes perhaps, was enough to strike. The scream was a signal or a reaction, but it was deliberate. And the blue ink note placed on the desk was meant to mislead us. Grayson, intrigued, leaned forward. "You're saying the note was planted after the murder?" "Oui, Inspector," Poirot said. "The black ink on the desk, the clean pen, these suggest the note was written elsewhere with blue ink and placed to suggest a struggle. But the burned letter in Monsieur Reed's room, it was the true warning, and someone tried to destroy it." Sir Reginald exploded. "This is nonsense. You're accusing us all, Poirot, with no proof." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Proof, Sir Reginald? It is coming. But first I ask you all to consider. Who had the most to lose from Monsieur Reed's work on the will? Who feared exposure? The truth, it is close, and the murderer, they feel the net tightening." The room fell silent, the guests' faces a gallery of fear and suspicion. Hastings whispered, "Poirot, you're pushing them hard." "Do you know who did it?" Poirot's voice was a murmur. "Not yet, mon ami, but the trap is set. The murderer. They will make a mistake now. They must. The little gray cells, they are ready." As the guests dispersed, their alibis strained and their secrets exposed, Murstone Hall seemed to pulse with tension. Poirot's trap was in place, but the murderer remained a shadow watching, waiting for the final act. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The drawing room of Murstone Hall was a theater of shadows. As the clock struck 9, its chimes reverberating through the tense silence. The guests sat in a semicircle, their faces pale under the chandelier's glow, each one braced for the climax of Hercule Poirot's investigation. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his notebook open, his expression a mix of skepticism and anticipation. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, felt his heart pound. He knew his friend was about to unveil the truth, and the air crackled with the weight of impending revelation. Poirot rose, his small frame radiating authority, his mustache perfectly aligned, his green eyes gleaming with the clarity of a man who had solved the puzzle. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady and commanding, "the murder of Monsieur Thomas Reed is no longer a mystery. The truth, it has been hidden by clever misdirection. But the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot, they do not falter. Tonight I shall reveal the murderer." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice clutched her handkerchief. Sir Reginald's face reddened. Clara Ashford's hand froze on her necklace, and Lydia Crane shrank into Victor Langston's side. Henry Ashford's eyes darted nervously, while Dr. Evelyn Ward remained impassive, her sharp features unyielding. Grayson cleared his throat. "Let's have it, Poirot." "Who did it and how?" Poirot raised a hand, his tone deliberate. "Patience, Inspector. To understand the crime, we must first understand the motive. Monsieur Reed, as solicitor, held a dangerous power, the power to alter the Ashford family will. This will, it was a source of conflict, non. Sir Reginald believed he was entitled to more. Mademoiselle Lydia's inheritance was at stake. Monsieur Henri's ventures depended on funds. But there was another deeper secret, one that Monsieur Reed uncovered. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Let us begin with the clues." The letter opener, with its silver rose clasp, matched Madame Clara's necklace and the cufflink found outside. The cigarette case, monogrammed R.A., pointed to Sir Reginald. The blue silk, torn on the rose bush, implicated Mademoiselle Lydia. These were red herrings carefully placed to mislead. But one clue was true. The drop of black ink on the desk, separate from the blue ink note reading, "Trust no one. The will—" Hastings leaned forward, whispering, "The ink, Poirot. You said it was key." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low but audible. The note was written in blue ink, yet the desk had only black. The pen, wiped clean, suggested tampering. And the burned letter in Monsieur Reed's room, also in blue ink, warned of dangerous changes. These were not accidents. They were the murderer's mistake. Poirot turned to Clara Ashford, whose face was ashen. Madame Clara, you saw an argument in the library at 6, oui? You claimed it was with a man, but you hesitated, your eyes betraying fear. Why? Because you knew the person and you feared to name them. Clara's voice trembled. I told you what I saw. Non, Poirot said sharply. You lied. There was no argument at 6. Monsieur Henri found Reed alone, irritated but alive. But Mademoiselle Lydia overheard an argument at 5:30 with a man's voice. This was the truth you tried to obscure, Madame Clara, because you were protecting someone. He turned to Lydia. Mademoiselle, your tears, your fear, they were real, but your silence about the scream was telling. You screamed, did you not? You saw something in the library at 8:30, something that horrified you. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Yes. I screamed. I went to the library to speak to Uncle Thomas about the will. I saw him slumped over the desk, the letter opener in his chest. I was terrified and ran back to the dining room. Victor Langston stood, his face pale. Lydia, why didn't you say? I was afraid, she sobbed. I thought they'd blame me. Poirot's gaze softened, but he pressed on. And who, mademoiselle, did you see leaving the library as you approached? Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. It was Victor. The room erupted in gasps. Victor's face drained of color, his hands clenching. Lydia, that's not true. I was with you at dinner. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the protests. Monsieur Langston, you are a barrister, skilled in law, in wills, in deception. You knew Monsieur Reed was reviewing the will, and you feared he would uncover a secret about your past. The burned letter in Reed's room, it was from you, written in blue ink, warning him to leave the will unchanged. But he refused, did he not? He discovered your fraud. A forged document, perhaps, to secure Mademoiselle Lydia's inheritance for yourself. Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. You left the dining room briefly, claiming to read in the drawing room. But you went to the library where you confronted Reed. He threatened to expose you, and in a moment of desperation, you seized the letter opener and struck. You placed the blue ink note written earlier to suggest a struggle. The scream, Lydia's scream, came as you fled, and you returned to the dining room before the others rushed to the library. Grayson stepped forward, his voice sharp. Proof, Poirot. Where's your proof? Poirot smiled faintly. The proof, Inspector, is in the blue ink pen, found this afternoon in Monsieur Langston's room, hidden in a book. My inquiries to the servants confirmed it, and the cufflink with the rose motif, it was not Madame Clara's but yours, Monsieur Langston, a gift from Mademoiselle Lydia dropped as you climbed through the library window to stage an outside entry. Victor's composure cracked, his voice rising. This is absurd! You've no evidence. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The letter, the ink, the cufflink, your absence, they align, monsieur. And your motive, greed and fear of exposure. You killed Thomas Reed to protect your secret, Lydia sobbed, collapsing into her chair. Victor's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. I didn't mean to. He was going to ruin everything. Grayson signaled his constable. Victor Langston, you're under arrest. As the handcuffs clicked, the room exhaled, the tension breaking like a wave. Poirot stepped back, his work done, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The truth had been unveiled, and Murstone Hall's shadows were dispelled, at least for now. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after Victor Langston's arrest, Murstone Hall seemed to exhale, its oppressive atmosphere lightened by the revelation of the truth. The mist that had clung to the Devonshire hills had lifted, and sunlight streamed through the tall windows, gilding the drawing room where Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings sat alone. The other guests, still reeling from the events of the previous night, had retreated to their rooms, leaving the house quiet, almost mournful. Inspector Grayson and his men had departed with Langston in custody, their work concluded. But Poirot remained, his tisane cooling on the table beside him, his expression contemplative. Hastings, nursing a cup of tea, broke the silence. "Well, Poirot, you've done it again. I must say I didn't see Langston as the culprit until you laid it all out. But how did you know? That blue ink and the cufflink, it was all so intricate." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his features. "Mon ami, the mind of Hercule Poirot, it is like a mirror. It reflects the truth, even when it is obscured by shadows. The murder of Monsieur Reed, it was a crime of desperation, but also of calculation. The murderer, he believed he could outwit us all, but he underestimated the little gray cells." Hastings leaned forward, eager for insight. "But the red herrings, Sir Reginald's cigarette case, Lydia's silk, Clara's cufflink, how did you see through them?" Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes distant. "The red herrings, Hastings, they were too perfect, too deliberate. A cigarette case wiped clean, a silk scrap torn so precisely, a cufflink matching a necklace. These were not accidents. They were the work of a mind seeking to confuse. But the blue ink, the burned letter, these were the murderer's mistakes. Victor Langston, he wrote the warning letter to Reed, hoping to dissuade him from altering the will. When that failed, he acted, and in his haste he left the note in blue ink, not realizing the desk held only black." Hastings nodded, piecing it together, and Lydia's scream. That was what clinched it, wasn't it? "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "The scream, it was the pivot." Mademoiselle Lydia saw Langston fleeing the library, and her shock betrayed him. Her silence, her fear, it was not for herself, but for the man she loved. Love, Hastings, it blinds, but it also reveals. She could not protect him forever. Hastings sighed, glancing out at the gardens. Poor girl. To lose her fiancé to such a crime? It's tragic. Poirot's expression grew solemn. Tragedy, yes, but also justice. Monsieur Reed, he was a man of duty, seeking to protect the Ashford family's legacy. Langston, driven by greed and fear of exposure, betrayed that duty. The will, it was not merely about money, it was about trust. And Langston broke it. He set down his cup, his hands folding neatly in his lap. This case, Hastings, it reminds us of the fragility of human nature. The desire for wealth, for security, it can twist even the most polished soul. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from Hercule Poirot. The little gray cells, they see what others overlook. Hastings smiled, accustomed to Poirot's pride, but warmed by its sincerity. You're a marvel, Poirot. But what now? The family's in tatters. Lady Beatrice, Sir Reginald, Lydia, they'll never be the same. Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the window. None, they will not, but they will heal in time. The truth, it wounds, but it also cleanses. Murstone Hall will endure as it has for centuries, and its secrets will fade into memory. He rose, adjusting his impeccable coat. Come, mon ami, our work here is done. The train to London awaits, and I have a craving for a proper croissant, which this charming but provincial house cannot provide. Hastings chuckled, following Poirot to the door. You and your croissants. But I suppose you've earned it. As they stepped into the hall, Poirot paused, glancing back at the drawing room. One last thought, Hastings. The murderer, he thought he could control the narrative like a playwright. But life, it is not a play. It is a puzzle, and the pieces, they always fit if one knows how to look. With that, Poirot turned and walked toward the waiting carriage, his step light, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Hastings followed, the weight of Murstone Hall lifting from his shoulders, replaced by the familiar comfort of his friend's unerring logic. The case was closed, the truth revealed. and Hercule Poirot, as always, exited quietly, leaving behind a house forever changed by his presence. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. The following morning, Murstone Hall stood bathed in the soft golden light of late autumn, its ivy-clad walls gleaming as if untouched by the darkness of the past days. Yet within its grand rooms the echoes of Thomas Reed's murder lingered, a wound not easily healed. The guests, now free to leave under Inspector Grayson's reluctant permission, moved with a subdued air, their packing punctuated by hushed conversations and wary glances. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a pillar of calm, his suitcase neatly packed, his mustache as pristine as ever. Captain Hastings, standing by the window in the morning room, watched the comings and goings with a heavy heart, still processing the dramatic unraveling of Victor Langston's guilt. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning to his friend who was adjusting his tie in a small mirror, "do you think they'll ever recover from this? Lady Beatrice, Lydia, the others, they're shattered." Poirot paused, his green eyes thoughtful. "Mon ami, the human spirit, it is resilient yet fragile. The Ashfords, they will carry this scar, but they will endure. The truth, it is a bitter medicine, but it purifies. Without it, Murstone Hall would have festered with secrets." Hastings nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "And Lydia, poor girl. To lose her fiancé to such a betrayal, it's heartbreaking." "Oui," Poirot agreed, his voice soft. "Mademoiselle Lydia loved Monsieur Langston, and love, it blinds. But her courage in revealing the truth, it will be her salvation. She will find strength in time." The door opened and Lady Beatrice entered, her silver hair impeccably arranged, but her face etched with exhaustion. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady but weary. "I wish to thank you before you depart. Your presence, though it brought pain, has saved us from a greater darkness. Thomas's death, it was a blow, but knowing the truth gives us a path forward." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of quiet respect. "Madam, it is my duty to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. Monsieur Reed, he was a man of honor, and his death, it was a tragedy born of greed. You will rebuild, I am certain." Lady Beatrice's lips trembled, but she nodded. "The will. Thomas's work, it will be honored. I've spoken with a new solicitor to ensure it. Lydia's inheritance is secure, and Reginald, he has agreed to accept the original terms." "A wise decision," Poirot said. "The will, it was the spark of this crime, but it need not ignite further conflict." As Lady Beatrice left, Sir Reginald appeared, his usual bluster subdued. "Poirot," he said gruffly, "I misjudged you. Thought you were meddling, but you've done us a service. That cigarette case business, clever trick, wasn't it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The cigarette case, Sir Reginald, it was a distraction, but not of my making. The murderer sought to point fingers, but the little gray cells, they see through such ploys." Sir Reginald grunted, offering a reluctant nod before retreating. Clara Ashford followed, her red hair loose and her eyes red-rimmed. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm sorry for my part in the confusion. I was so afraid, but you saw the truth." "Madame," Poirot replied gently. "Fear, it clouds the mind, but your honesty, it helped illuminate the path. The cufflink, it was not yours, but it led us to the true culprit." Clara managed a weak smile before departing. Hastings watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "You tied it all together so neatly. The ink, the cufflink, the scream. But what if Langston hadn't cracked? Would you have caught him?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, the murderer, they always crack, for the truth, it is a weight they cannot bear. Langston's mistake was the blue ink, his arrogance in thinking he could outwit Hercule Poirot. The cufflink, the note, These were his attempts to control the narrative, but the narrative, it belongs to the truth. The sound of a carriage crunching on the gravel outside signaled their imminent departure. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise. "Come, Hastings. London awaits, and I have a longing for the simplicity of my apartment, where the chaos of human passions is kept at bay." As they stepped into the hall, Lydia Crane appeared, her delicate frame swathed in a dark shawl. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know how to thank you. I loved Victor, but I see now what he was. I'll never forgive myself for not speaking sooner." Poirot took her hand, his touch gentle. "Mademoiselle, you acted with courage when it mattered most. The scream, it was your heart crying out for justice. Hold fast to that courage and you will find peace." Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered before turning away. In the carriage, as Murstone Hall receded into the distance, Hastings leaned back, his mind still turning over the case. Poirot, do you ever tire of this? Peeling back layers of deceit, seeing the worst in people?" Poirot gazed out at the rolling hills, his expression serene. "Never, mon ami. For every layer of deceit, there is a layer of truth, and to uncover it, to bring order to chaos, this is the work of Hercule Poirot. The human heart, it is complex, but it is also beautiful in its flaws. We must understand it, not tire of it." The carriage rolled on, carrying them toward London, leaving behind a house forever altered by the truth. Murstone Hall stood silent, its secrets laid bare, and Poirot, with his unerring logic, had once again restored order to a world thrown into disarray. Chapter 13. The Unseen Shadow. The journey back to London was underway, the carriage wheels humming steadily along the country lanes. But the serene beauty of the Devonshire hills did little to ease the lingering disquiet in Captain Hastings' mind. Murstone Hall, with its grandeur and its secrets, seemed to cling to him like the morning mist. Hercule Poirot, seated opposite, appeared as composed as ever, his gloved hands resting neatly on his lap, his eyes half closed in contemplation. Yet Hastings sensed that his friend's thoughts were not entirely at rest. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence, "you solved the case, caught Langston red-handed, as it were. But I can't help feeling there's something more. The way Lady Beatrice spoke of the will, the tension in that house. It's as if another secret is lurking, one we haven't touched." Poirot's eyes opened, a faint gleam of approval in them. "Mon ami, your instincts, they improve with time. There is a shadow in Murstone Hall that we have not fully illuminated. The murder of Monsieur Reed, it was solved, but the ripples of this crime, they suggest a deeper current." Hastings frowned. "You mean another crime? Or something else about the will?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his voice low and deliberate. "Not another crime, Hastings, but a motive that runs deeper than greed. Victor Langston killed to protect his fraud, oui. But why was the will so contentious? Why did Monsieur Reed's work provoke such fear? The little gray cells, they whisper that we have seen only the surface." Before Hastings could press further, the carriage slowed, and a sharp rap on the window startled them. A young constable, breathless from running, peered inside. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Inspector Grayson sent me. There's been a development at Murstone Hall. You're needed back at once." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes sharpening. "A development, you say? Of what nature?" The constable hesitated. "It's Miss Crane, sir. She's tried to harm herself. Left a note saying she couldn't live with the guilt. The doctor's with her now, but Grayson thought you should know." Hastings' heart sank. "Good heavens, Lydia! Is she all right?" "She's alive, sir," the constable said. "Dr. Ward acted quickly. But the note, It mentions something about the will, and the inspector thinks it's connected to the case. Poirot's expression grew grave. We return at once. The truth, it is not yet fully revealed. The carriage turned back toward Murstone Hall, the horses' hooves pounding with urgency. When they arrived, the house was in a state of controlled chaos. Servants whispered in the halls, and Inspector Grayson met them at the door, his face grim. "Poirot, I thought we'd wrap this up, but Miss Crane's note, it's shaken things. She's upstairs, stable but weak." Dr. Ward's with her. Poirot nodded, his step brisk as he followed Grayson to Lydia's room. The young woman lay in bed, her face pale as moonlight, her eyes closed. Dr. Evelyn Ward stood beside her, checking her pulse with professional calm. A crumpled note lay on the bedside table, written in a trembling hand. Poirot picked up the note, his gloved fingers careful. It read, "I cannot bear it. The will, it was my fault. I knew too much and said nothing." "Forgive me," Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, felt a pang of sorrow. Poor girl. She must feel responsible for Langston's actions. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Non, Hastings. This note, it speaks of guilt, but not for Langston. There is something more, something she knew about the will itself." He turned to Dr. Ward. "Docteur, how is Mademoiselle Crane?" "She'll recover," Dr. Ward said, her voice steady. "She took a small dose of laudanum, not enough to be fatal, thankfully. I found her just in time." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And you, Doctor, were quick to act." "Most fortunate. Tell me, what do you know of the will that Monsieur Reed was revising?" Dr. Ward's composure faltered, her sharp features tightening. "The will? I'm the family physician, not their solicitor. I knew Thomas was working on it, but nothing specific." Poirot nodded, though his eyes suggested he was unconvinced. "Merci, Docteur, we shall speak again." Downstairs, Lady Beatrice awaited them, her face etched with worry. "Monsieur Poirot, this is dreadful. Lydia, she's so fragile. What could have driven her to this?" Poirot clasped his hands, his voice gentle but probing. "Madame, the will, what was its true significance?" Mademoiselle Lydia's note suggests she knew something that burdened her. What secret did Monsieur Reed uncover? Lady Beatrice hesitated, her hands twisting her handkerchief. "The will, it was my late husband's, as I told you. There were disputes. Reginald wanted more, Henry needed funds, Lydia's portion was contested. But Thomas found something else, something he wouldn't share with me fully. He said it concerned an old family scandal, something that could ruin us if revealed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A scandal, madam. And who else knew of this?" Lady Beatrice's gaze flickered to the floor. "Only Thomas, as far as I know. He was discreet, but he hinted that someone in the family might be compromised." Poirot turned to Grayson. "Inspector, we must examine Monsieur Reed's papers again. The burned letter, the blue ink. They point to a secret that drove Langston to murder and Lydia to despair. There is a shadow behind this crime, and we must bring it into the light." Grayson nodded, though his frustration was evident. "I'll have my men go through Reed's room again." "But Poirot, are you saying Langston's not the whole story?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Langston killed Reed, but the why, it is deeper than we thought. The will, it hides a truth that someone still fears. We must find it before another tragedy strikes." As they moved to Reed's room, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, do you think Lydia's attempt was because she knew about this scandal?" "Perhaps," Poirot murmured. "Or perhaps she was pressured to silence. The little gray cells, they sense a larger design. We are close, mon ami, but the unseen shadow remains." Murstone Hall once again was a labyrinth of secrets, and Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth was far from over. Chapter 14. The hidden truth. The late afternoon light cast long, slanting shadows across Murstone Hall, bathing its ancient corridors in a golden haze that belied the turmoil within. Hercule Poirot, with Captain Hastings at his side, followed Inspector Grayson to Thomas Reed's room, where the solicitor's belongings had been meticulously searched, yet yielded little beyond the burned letter. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish, but to Poirot it carried the sharper tang of secrets yet to be uncovered. Lydia Crane's desperate act and her cryptic note had ignited a new spark in the investigation, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with purpose. Hastings, his brow furrowed, glanced at Poirot as they entered the room. "This scandal Lady Beatrice mentioned, Poirot, do you think it's the key to Lydia's despair? Could it be tied to Langston's motive?" Poirot's eyes gleamed as he surveyed the room, his gloved fingers trailing lightly over the edge of a mahogany writing desk. "Mon ami, the scandal is the heart of this affair, the shadow behind the murder. Victor Langston killed to protect his fraud, oui. But the will's true secret, it drove him to such extremes and pushed Mademoiselle Lydia to the edge of despair. We must find what Monsieur Reed discovered." Inspector Grayson, rifling through a stack of papers, looked up with a scowl. "We've been over this room twice, Poirot. Nothing but legal documents and that burned letter. If there's a scandal, it's well hidden." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Hidden, oui, but not invisible. The truth, Inspector, it leaves traces like footprints in the sand. Let us examine the desk once more. Not for what is there, but for what is not." He knelt, his movements precise, and opened the desk's drawers, his fingers probing for hidden compartments. After a moment, he paused, his eyes narrowing at a faint seam in the wood. With a gentle press, a small panel clicked open, revealing a slim, locked notebook bound in black leather. "Voilà," Poirot murmured, lifting it carefully. "The secrets of Monsieur Reed, they are here." Grayson's eyes widened. "A hidden compartment? How did my men miss that?" Poirot smiled faintly. "They looked with their eyes, Inspector, not with their minds. Now let us see what this contains." The notebook's lock was delicate, and Poirot, with a deft touch, used a small tool from his pocket to open it. Inside were pages of Reed's meticulous handwriting, detailing the Ashford family will and its revisions. But one entry, dated the day before his death, stood out. "Confirmed the discrepancy in the 1910 codicil. Sir Reginald's claim to the estate is invalid. Proof of his illegitimacy found in old family records. Beatrice unaware, but disclosure would ruin Reginald's standing. Must confront him privately," Hastings gasped. "Sir Reginald illegitimate? That's the scandal?" Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Oui, Hastings. Monsieur Reed discovered that Sir Reginald, the younger brother of Lady Beatrice's late husband, was not a true Ashford. This would strip him of his claim to the estate, a blow to his pride and position. Langston, as Lydia's fiancé, may have learned this and feared it would disrupt her inheritance, tied to the same will." Grayson rubbed his chin. "So Langston killed Reed to keep this quiet? But why Lydia's guilt?" Poirot closed the notebook, his voice soft but firm. "Mademoiselle Lydia, she knew of this scandal, perhaps through Reed or Langston. Her note, 'The will, it was my fault,' suggests she felt responsible for not acting sooner. She may have suspected Langston's intentions but remained silent, torn by love." They returned to the drawing room, where the remaining guests, Lady Beatrice, Sir Reginald, Clara, Henry, and Dr. Ward, awaited, their faces a mix of exhaustion and apprehension. Lydia, still weak, was absent under Dr. Ward's care. Poirot held up the notebook, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the murder of Monsieur Reed was not merely about greed, but about a secret that threatened to unravel this family. This notebook reveals that Sir Reginald's claim to the Ashford estate was invalid, a fact Monsieur Reed intended to disclose. Sir Reginald leapt to his feet, his face crimson. "That's a lie! I'm an Ashford, born and bred! Reed was meddling, trying to cheat me." Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand to her heart. "Reginald, is this true?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "It is true, madame." Monsieur Reed found evidence in old family records, a birth certificate hidden away, proving Sir Reginald's illegitimacy. "He planned to confront you, Sir Reginald, but Victor Langston learned of this and acted first, killing Reed to protect his own interests in Mademoiselle Lydia's inheritance." Clara's voice trembled. "But why Lydia's attempt on her life?" Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle. "Madam, Mademoiselle Lydia overheard Reed discussing this scandal, perhaps with Langston. She knew the truth would destroy her family, and her love for Langston blinded her to his crime. When she saw him fleeing the library, her scream was one of horror, but her silence was one of guilt. She could not bear the weight of her inaction. Sir Reginald sank into his chair, his bluster gone. "All this for a lie about my birth? I never asked Reed to dig into that." Poirot's eyes softened. "Non, monsieur, but secrets, they have a way of surfacing. Langston exploited this one, but you are not without fault. Your disputes over the will created the tension that fueled this tragedy." Grayson stepped forward, taking the notebook. "This is enough to close the case, Poirot. Langston's motive is clear now, and this explains Lydia's note. I'll need to question her again, gently." Poirot nodded. "Do so with care, Inspector. She is a victim of this house's secrets as much as anyone." As the guests absorbed the revelation, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, you found the truth again. But this scandal, it changes everything for the Ashfords." "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied. "The truth, it is a double-edged sword. It frees, but it also wounds. Murstone Hall will never be the same, but perhaps it will be stronger for it." The room fell silent, the weight of the hidden truth settling over them. Poirot, his work nearly done, stood ready to depart. But the shadow of Murstone Hall's secrets lingered, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the power of truth. Chapter 15. The Final Thread. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting Murstone Hall in hues of amber and violet as the final day of Hercule Poirot's investigation drew to a close. The grand estate, once a symbol of unyielding tradition, now stood as a testament to the fragility of secrets and the power of truth. The drawing room where so much had been revealed was quiet, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the ticking of the grandfather clock. Poirot, his suitcase packed and his coat impeccably brushed, stood near the hearth, his small frame radiating a quiet triumph. Captain Hastings, ever his loyal companion, sat nearby, his thoughts a tangle of awe and melancholy. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you've unraveled it all, the murder, the scandal, Lydia's despair, but I can't help wondering if there's more we've missed. This house feels like it's still holding its breath." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mon ami, you have developed a nose for the hidden, have you not? But rest assured, the threads of this mystery, they are now woven together. The murder of Monsieur Reed, the illegitimacy of Sir Reginald, the despair of Mademoiselle Lydia. These are not separate stories, but one tapestry, complete at last." The door opened and Lady Beatrice entered, her silver hair catching the firelight. Her face, though weary, held a newfound resolve. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I wish to see you before you leave. The truth you've uncovered, it has shaken us, but it has also set us free. I've decided to make amends to ensure Lydia's future and to reconcile with Reginald. The Ashfords will endure." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of quiet approval. "Madame, your strength, it is admirable. The truth, it is a heavy burden, but it clears the path for healing. Monsieur Reed's death. It was a tragedy, but it has brought clarity to your family. Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened. Thomas was a good man. His work on the will, it was meant to protect us, not destroy us. I only wish we had listened to him sooner. Before Poirot could respond, Dr. Evelyn Ward appeared, her sharp features softened by a rare hint of vulnerability. Monsieur Poirot, I must thank you. Lydia is recovering, and your insight into her guilt, it helped me understand her pain. I've been too clinical, perhaps, in my care for this family. Poirot's gaze was piercing but kind. Doctor, your skill saved Mademoiselle Lydia's life, but it is your heart that will help her heal. You knew of the scandal, did you not? Yet you remained silent. Dr. Ward nodded, her voice low. Thomas confided in me briefly about Reginald's illegitimacy. He swore me to secrecy, said it was for Beatrice to decide. I thought my silence was loyalty, but it only deepened the tragedy. Poirot's smile was gentle. Loyalty, it is a noble thing, but truth, it is nobler still. You have learned this, Doctor, and that is enough. As Dr. Ward withdrew, Inspector Grayson entered, his notebook tucked under his arm. Poirot, I've just finished with Langston. He's confessed fully, admitted to the fraud, the murder, everything. Said he panicked when Reed threatened to expose his forged documents. The notebook you found sealed his fate. Poirot nodded. Bon Inspector, the notebook, it was the final thread. Victor Langston, he wove a web of deceit, but he could not escape the logic of Hercule Poirot. Grayson managed a grudging smile. You're a marvel, Poirot, I'll give you that. But this scandal, Reginald's illegitimacy, it's going to shake the county. You sure you want to leave it like this? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The truth, Inspector, it is not mine to keep or to hide. It belongs to those who live with it. The Ashfords, they will decide how to carry this burden. As Grayson departed, Hastings stood, his expression thoughtful. Poirot, you said the tapestry was complete, but what about Sir Reginald? He's lost his claim, his pride. Will he cause trouble? Poirot adjusted his hat, his voice calm but firm. Sir Reginald, he is a man of bluster, but also of survival. He will accept his place, for to fight would only deepen his shame. The Ashfords, they are bound by more than blood. By duty, by history, they will find a way. The carriage awaited outside, its driver impatient in the gathering dusk. Poirot and Hastings stepped into the hall where Clara Ashford stood, her red hair catching the last rays of light. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady, I was wrong to doubt you. Thank you for seeing the truth even when I couldn't. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, the truth, it is like a star. It shines even in the darkest night. You helped by speaking, however late. As they boarded the carriage, Hastings glanced back at Murstone Hall, its towers silhouetted against the twilight. It's a grand old place, Poirot, but I'll be glad to leave it. Too many shadows. Poirot settled into his seat, his eyes distant. Shadows, oui, but they are banished by light. The case of Murstone Hall, it reminds us, Hastings, that secrets, they fester, but the truth, it liberates. Now let us return to London, where the croissants are fresh and the mysteries they await. The carriage rolled away, leaving Murstone Hall behind, its secrets laid bare, its wounds open but ready to heal. Poirot, his work complete, gazed out at the fading countryside, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, the next triumph of his little gray cells.